weights, which are about 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times higher compared to benchmark populations, which means that these populations clearly lack access to health. And again, the huge burden is on maternal health and infant health. And this creates a cycle of poverty and of inequity. This is a very interesting graph which has been produced and which shows how women which are malnourished or which suffer from anemia during pregnancy will give birth to low birth weight infants. And these low birth weight infants will have limited growth and cognitive development. And this will perpetuate a cycle of poverty, poor cognition, poor access to economic opportunities, because these girls will give birth to low birth weight babies. And again, that will limit their cognitive development and access to economic opportunities. And on the contrary, women which suffer from obesity or overweight during pregnancy will give birth to babies which have a higher chance of becoming overweight or obese later in life. So this is a stage during pregnancy that is critical in women's life, in women's health, because if we don't address that, not only it creates inequity for the woman herself inside her household, but it will perpetuate these cycles of poverty. Again, just a few roles and responsibilities which are so critical. As women are responsible of the bulk of agricultural production, and very importantly, they're managers of plant diversity. And this is something that is really important, because if we don't empower and let women express that knowledge and use that incredible traditional knowledge that they've got about plant diversity, we are losing more and more. We will lose more and more of that knowledge, which is now proven to be so important for adapting to climate change. This is just a figure, of about 250,000 plant species which have been identified globally. About 7,000 have been used throughout history. And only now 3 crops provide 50% of the bulk of the world's calories. So clearly, if we want to address the crisis of our food systems, we need to recuperate that traditional knowledge about plant species, and women are the main holders of that knowledge. Numerous constraints are exacerbated during time of crisis. And this is just, I know that another speaker will talk more about the COVID-19 crisis, but we know that, this had a huge impact on women's life and women's sexual and reproductive health, since it was estimated at the beginning of the crisis that would result in about 3 million more unsafe abortions, 15 million more unintended pregnancies, simply because lack of access to health services and because the deviation of the bulk of health services towards a crisis. So again, we need now to make sure women can access equitable, fair, and quality health services. Another issue that is so important is access to land. And again, if we're talking about food systems and delivering safe and nutritious food for all, in which women have got such a critical role, we need to make sure women access land in an equitable way. And only 13% of landowners in low and middle income countries are women, which is, again, a staggering figure. Access to technology and IT needs to be also improved for women, as 500 million women are not connected. So we need to clearly go from a situation where women are entangled into a poverty cycle of poor health and nutrition, unequal access to education, unpaid care work, burden of domestic activities, unequal access to healthcare and poor access to economic opportunities and land tenure. And through a gender responsive One Health, we need to make sure we reverse the situation. And they make sure that women can access all these factors and segments of knowledge and technology and health. So our group has produced a couple of papers, which I would invite you to consult if you want to know more about all these issues I've just mentioned. And basically, our framework is showing that, we've got inequalities everywhere. We've got inequities, and women are suffering the most from these inequities. And we need to change the paradigm. This is a leverage a theory by which, if you push on in the middle of that line, you will have less impact than if you push on that level. And we need to change our vision and change from the pursuit of GDP and overconsumption towards a focus on well-being, reconnecting with nature, and acknowledging that we need to now recuperate our functioning ecosystems and protect biodiversity, which will ensure the sustainability and resilience of communities, of ecosystems, of societies. And I think that reconnection with nature is really fundamental. We have just forgotten that we're part of nature. We have created a disconnect. And we think that we don't need nature. We think that we can put nature in national parks, in protected area, and maybe destroy it in other places and recreate it, regenerate it. But it doesn't work like that. I mean, just to give us a bit of a humility, let's look at us as an ecosystem. We have got our microbiota, which is 2, 3, even 4 kilos of bacteria, fungi, viruses in our body. We are an ecosystem. We cannot live without nature. We are part of nature. And I think, this is really important. And part of that vision will only be achieved if we mainstream gender responsive One Health at all levels of society, at the levels of civil society, of businesses, and policymaking, and research and academia. And that will make sure that we can mainstream a rights-based and gender-responsive One Health approach. So this is just an example, again, now a lot of people talk about nature-based solutions, but when you roll out these solutions, you have to be really careful in making sure that the way it's going to impact women. For example, a lot of people are doing restoration of degraded rangeland, but you need to see, the impact it's going to have on women. So nutritionally, yes, it will impact women positively. They will need a lot of land to be able to do that sort of nature-based solution, and the income will be very low. So, you need to have a gender responsive approach when you roll out that sort of solution to regenerate biodiversity and conserve biodiversity. So, I'm just also emphasizing the fact that when you put women in decision-making roles, you have incredible results. There's been a study that was published recently, which shows, for example, that firms with greater gender diversity reduce their CO2 emissions by 5% more compared to firms with more male managers. Well, simply because generally women are more concerned than men about climate change. They feel a greater need for action in tackling climate change and are more likely to change their behavior. And men generally trust more in technical solutions. Obviously, you can't generalize, but this is based on a lot of studies. So this means, we need to close the gender gap in governance systems. Again, we need to mainstream gender-responsive One Health at all levels of society. So this is a picture, that I picked up on Antonio Guterres' Twitter account, where he was showing himself, at one of the meetings in November 7, at the opening of the COP27, amongst all the male leaders. And I just wish, we could see more of these pictures. Well, this is, again, the Secretary General with his climate advising group, which is a lot more equitable and which will reverse the negative trends that we are seeing today. So there is a lot of hope, and I think we just need to mainstream then that gender responsive One Health as much as we can, and I can only invite you to join our group. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie. This was really fantastic. I enjoyed it very much, even though I heard everything before, but this was really put in a new scope, and this was really fantastic. You have a lot of clapping around the group. Do we have a brave person to ask a question for Julie? Would you like anything else to be clarified? There is somebody in EcoHealth audience. Can they ask from the auditorium? They probably need a mic or something. Okay, she's coming.
Hi, Julie. Thank you so much for your presentation. In the first few slides, mentioned that women are more likely to die from natural disasters than men. Which natural disasters are you referring to? Because we talk about natural disasters that I imagine earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanoes, and I'm looking at us saying here now with males and females, if the tsunamis to the rise. Would the females be more likely to die than the males? Is that a biological component to that? Or are you talking about specific natural disasters like family?
I'm sorry, I didn't grab all of your question, but just to confirm that I've understood the line was not very good, and I'm sorry about that. Can you just confirm that you'd like some clarification about the slide about women and children being 40 times more likely than men to suffer from natural disaster? Is that it? Is that correct? Your question?
Yes, it was a specific slide that said women.
Yeah. Yes, there's been. I mean, it's a general figure, and it's staggering. And I think it's been, it's been used a number of times. I think it's FAO who published that. But one of the reasons, I mean, there are different reasons. One is women can be physically less prepared to deal with an emergency situation where you've got to run away, where you've got to leave, where you've got to climb, where you've got to escape. And the second, which I think most important reason, is that usually women don't want to leave unless everybody's safe. And that is the main reason. So they will wait. They will wait to make sure the kids are safe, the grandmother is safe, the husband is safe, and they're the last to go, and then they're the ones who are suffering. So I think this is another sort of critical aspect of gender inequity, and it's associated with the roles and responsibilities of women, but which are innate, that sort of caregiving innate sense that exists as well. There is a part which is role and responsibility and a real burden, but the caring, when you've got kids, of course you're not going to leave them behind, full stop. I think that's it.
Yeah, if I may jump in, I would also agree that it's less to do with women's inability or ability, whatever, but more to do with care. So I would agree with that. Yeah. I just wanted to say that from when you have a question from the audience, from the main room, there is some kind of echo. So please try to talk slowly, okay? So that we can understand you. Okay.
Thank you for the presentation. Just a follow-up to your statement that you made with regards to the question she asked about women having that innate ability to care. So my question is, then how can we harness that ability, that innate tendency to care, rather than seeing it as an inequity? How can we do that? So that that ability of the woman to care, and for that matter, it seems as if they are disadvantaged. How can we harness it? I hope my question is clear.
I'm sorry, I didn't get I didn't hear your words clearly. So has somebody, maybe somebody has understood or can, I just didn't get your question. I'm terribly sorry about that.
I'm asking about the innate tendency, the abilities of the women for care. I'm asking that how can we harness that ability rather than seeing it as an inequity or a disadvantage, if that is what would help build a family system?
Well, I think, yeah, I got your question and thank you. That's a really interesting question. I think, you know, when you look at some of the last slide that I presented about the women also sense of responsibility towards climate change, towards healthcare, we just need to have more gender equity in decision-making roles, you know, because that will also create more equitable health systems and delivery of health services. When you look at sexual and reproductive health, for example, you know, you just need to have more equitable health systems and more equitable distribution of decision-making roles. So I think harnessing that the good side of the care aspect, as you say, is really important. And I think also in empowering women, you know, in their communities when they have these roles, and you can really articulate solutions towards all the different problems, you know, around food systems, around biodiversity conservation, about climate change, and give them more, empower them in doing what they do very well. So it can, you know, it can be caring, it can be a lot of other things, but you just need to recognize that they need to have that equitable access to all the different services, you know, that are or should be available. And we need to harness them with the solution. A lot of them have got knowledge and know what's right to do. You know, they just don't have the means to express all this or to roll out these solutions, you know, when you're talking about climate-based adaptation, etc.
Okay, thank you, Julie. If there are more questions, we will save it for the end, and then maybe we can discuss more about this. And we should move forward because we have a lot more to share with you. Now I have the honor to present you Agnes Yave. I hope I pronounced this well. She's going to present the institutionalizing gender issues into the African One Health University network. And I'm very happy to know that there is a strong One Health stream in Africa. And Agnes is a head grant and resource mobilization and Africa One Health University network. And she's our first guest of honor with some interesting experience from Africa. So Agnes, I hope you're with us. Yes, you are, I can see.
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Do you have a presentation to share? Or you will talk?
No, I do actually have a presentation.
Okay, perfect. We can see it.
Okay. I want to thank the organizers of this conference, of this, especially the opportunity really to share with you the One Health, the gender institutionalization in One Health in Africa, One Health University Network. This, I want to share just what we have done and where we are at, but also most importantly, where we are really trying to move regarding gender integration within our work. I'll just briefly, maybe for the sake of the participants that are not so familiar with Afrohun, I'll just briefly talk about what Afrohun is, then share what we have done as a network, and then what we are learning about institutionalizing gender. Yeah, Afrohun, in brief, otherwise called Africa One Health University Network, is actually just rebranded to Afrohun. We were, those of the participants that could probably be familiar with or share, this is the same institution. We just rebranded, and the rebranding really is moving into a continental mandate. We were originally looking at East, Central, and West Africa where we were, but increasingly we've had lots of demand from the universities across Africa, and we just rebranded and having also a continental mandate. Our vision is to be a global leader in One Health approaches to sustainable health, for health, productive animals, and prosperous communities and ecosystem. Briefly, of course, championing really One Health, especially within the university systems, but also taking the universities and have interfacing with government institutions where we are in promoting One Health multidisciplinary approaches within Africa and the African continent. We've had currently through our programs, we are operating in 10 countries, the ones that you see in blue. That is where we are having country offices, country operations within the funding that we have. But with the continental mandate, we are coming up with some innovations that allow us even to extend services to the rest of the continent through some innovative approaches where we are having a regional platform, which is the One Health Academy, the Afrohun Academy. We are currently having 19 member universities. And within those 19 member universities, we bring together schools of public health, schools of veterinary medicine, environmental health, and quite a number of other disciplines that really are interested in joining and advancing the One Health approach on the African continent. In terms of our looking at our 5-year vision on where we are looking at, we wish to become a leading brand for One Health. We've been operating since 2009. That's when the network was constituted, where schools of public health and veterinary medicine came together and agreed to work together to really champion the multidisciplinary approaches within the university system, with the understanding that the universities, the ones that are churning out workforce, really needed to embrace the One Health approach and therefore deliver to the continent a workforce that is really up to speed, that is producing graduates or products that can handle the current dynamics and current health challenges. Not just health challenges, but also other complex, weird challenges on the continent that require really a multidisciplinary approach. So we are within the university systems, promoting the One Health approach, leading processes, curriculum, but also institutional processes within universities that can enable the multidisciplinary learning to take place, such that we can have graduates that are needed in the workforce. So we are innovating, like I said, and we through our academy, Afrohuna Academy, we are looking at we have already started initiatives that are enabling us to have One Health certificate and credential, which is really needed for the continent. And we are looking to supporting the member universities and researchers, faculty, students. We have a very strong student programs within our member universities that are really championing One Health. And therefore, we are looking at producing that premium African workforce that really is ready to address the pandemics that we are seeing. And we are largely funded by donors, but we have already started processes that are helping us really take on also a solid business model where we are thinking ahead, actions or strategies that can really enable us to be sustainable. So tapping into the infrastructure, the university systems to make sure that the activities and products that we are developing are sustainable. So institutionalizing, having curricular reviews are some of the ways in which we are looking at sustainability that beyond the interventions or the project funded activities, such initiatives can continue within the universities. We have characteristically typical activities, and this of course, from this slide, I will jump into what we have done in terms of gender, but these are the typical kind of activities that we've been running over time. Certainly, being a university network, we have capacity building. Partnership is a major approach that we are using. We have so many partners within Africa and outside that we collaborate with and develop and deliver these needed services on the continent. Policy engagements. We do research. We are really co-creating and developing innovations with the students, looking at the challenges that are existing within the communities, and the students have been at the forefront of developing some innovations thereabout that are really looking at multidisciplinary teams that are developing these solutions. Conferences and seminars certainly is a strategy that we use to share. We normally have every 2 years, we have a conference. We are planning to have a conference this year. So it will be running. And then of course, outreach programs. Now coming to gender, what have we done? Where are we? What processes have we seen? And then later on, I will share with you what are we learning. Being a regional body, there are quite a number of processes that we standardize at the regional level. Tools, guidelines that we actually develop as standard documents or frameworks that we avail for countries and member institutions to customize based on their needs. So we've been developing materials. Particularly, there is the gender and One Health module. I want to acknowledge the fact that some of the members on the working group were actually behind this effort. Professor Helena Muguni and Bridget really supported us in pulling together this module. These are training. We have 16 training modules that we are that the universities are using for training on One Health and integrating One Health. And this gender and One Health module is one of them. I must say that at the country level within the universities, this module has been greatly used. Like they have different training programs, short courses. Some of them have integrated within curricula, and they've been using this as reference documents and reference materials. This material was put together by a team from the different countries, and their case studies, their examples, and these have continuously been updated. And in future, we are also looking at updating some of these materials. Of course, the other aspect, we as a network, we really take gender as key. Of course, we get support from partners to make it better, especially within the institutional framework, knowing that our organizations are highly male dominated. I will share with you one of the pictures. Since our inception, our dean, our governance body, who are deans of these institutions, they are male. They have been male all along. Even our board from inception has been like more 100% male because of the nature of the disciplines that we are working with. We are bringing together the deans of these institutions, and by nature, most of these deans have been male. So since inception, there has been that great, largely male dominated, but I'm happy to mention that with our strong gender interest, we are currently undergoing a board transition. And one of the area that has been critically looked at was having at least females. And now we have at least 3 female deans that have been taken on board as board members. So for us, that is very, very important, because the governance bodies are the ones that are directing the efforts and the actions of the organization. And therefore, it is important that we have the female representation at these governance bodies. So we have policies that we have articulated. We have a gender policy, we have a gender strategy, and we also recently rolled out a roadmap, a gender roadmap that really looks at our strategic plan, our core pillars, training and education, research, institutional development, and has articulated what we really need to do under each of these pillars. And the roadmap and the strategy were also developed after even an analysis and engagement at the different country levels, and getting suggestions on what needs to be done, what are the policies within the countries and the institutions, but also articulating and giving direction to the network on what kind of actions we need to do. And we are using these documents into our planning. We are currently doing our annual work plan, and these documents have been very, very critical. The roadmap particularly spells out in detail what we are supposed to do at each level. And this has been very helpful in enabling us plan some of the actions that we include in our work planning. Certainly, capacity building has been a key. We are dealing with scientists, and they really need to see the link between gender and the kind of work we are doing. And so the capacity building in gender, but also very explicitly indicating how this impacts the work we are doing. I think these have been key strategies that I have seen personally, seeing faculty really appreciate gender and what it means in either zoonotic disease or in any of the activities that we are doing. And therefore, I think for me, those tools have been very critical in doing our work. And then these, we provide them across the network. So the networks, the institutions don't have to start from scratch. We have them developed at the regional level, and we share this at the country level. They adapt, they pick what is relevant and applicable to them. The other area is really integrating gender into our programs, but also our activities. And where we are now, we have a short course, an online short course on gender. And these, even at country level, some countries have short courses on gender, all either as standalone course or as a module to the trainings that they have been offering at that level. And we have seen that there has been really that uptake of gender at the institutional level through utilizing these kind of modules, but also tailoring and integrating them into their work. Of course, the other countries are also integrating, because one of the aspects that we are promoting is integrating One Health into the university curricula where possible, all really supporting development of standalone courses. And in the courses that we have developed, we have seen, because we are very cautiously integrating gender, we have seen that quite a number of the either new programs or the modules where they are integrating One Health and gender has been part of the work that they've been doing. So we've really learned that these materials and the capacity that we have provided or received over time has been very instrumental in enabling us achieve what we are. So I have here, from my own perspective, institutionalization, what are we learning as a network? We've had different strategies that have really enabled us really to achieve what we have been able to achieve, as I have enumerated. One is the funders. And the first point I'm raising is that the funders push is very important, but is not enough. And the reason why I'm saying so is that we have our funders that we are funded by USAID, and we also have IDRC. We have a number of funders that we have. And when the funder really puts to us, gender is one of their key consideration. At what I've seen is that at the network level, it is picked. Plans will be developed. But during the process of implementation with limited resources, there's quite a lot of dynamics that comes into play. And depending on how much gender is being appreciated, it will either remain as a top priority or it will really fizzle out. And that takes me to the next point that I'm raising, which is gender champions and gender champions in key areas. We did identify champions, people who believe, have passion for gender, and these have been trained, but also given this extra role of supporting gender integration in all our work. So these champions are key, and they are key only if they're in key strategic areas. For instance, we have gender champions at the Secretariat. These have been at the core of really pushing for making sure that at least there are some actions that are integrated. In case of budget cuts, which is very typical, that we can have some actions that remain, all articulate what we need as implementers, really to see that gender is integrated, or at least some achievements in that direction is realized. So where we have champions in key areas, like at the Secretariat, And within the partner institutions, we identified the champions, but where they are not at the center of the key decision makers of which activity will remain in the budget, we have seen that in some cases, gender really fizzles out in the work plan. So to complement the requirements of the funder, having such champions within those key areas, or at least making sure that the key implementer, the key strategic implementers that make decisions are gender aware, appreciate, and really drive these processes. That is what we have seen that has seen the achievements that we've had. We have had this at different levels, including from the partners that we are working with, but also key at the secretariat, and now at the institutional level, they also need to be within the key implementing decision makers. Then the supportive tools, that one I already talked about them. When people are not very clear or so passionate about certain things, unless if there are tools that enable their work to be easy, we can always miss the targets or the intentions. But we have seen that having tools to guide implementation, how-to checklists, this is an area that we are still working on, but we feel that this is an area that will really enable us really achieve a lot at the implementation level. The other element is the experts, the gender experts, with experience in the sectors that we are working on, that can guide right from the governance bodies and through the implementers. And the reason why the experts are very important is that they have been able to articulate, as we were developing our roadmap, we had a gender expert who could articulate clearly the linkages of gender in health, in One Health, what the implications are if not addressed. And you could see faculty really appreciating this, so that the biases or misconceptions that people have about gender and this women issue is really demystified by really touching the work they are doing and showing them how the implications and what it means. So this has been also something that has been very, very useful in our organization. So looking forward, we are really certainly consolidating the achievements we have done, but also looking at really focusing on specific areas. We are having, we really want to increase the capacity, at least appreciation across. The network is big, there are so many actors and players. So we are developing some short courses, online short courses that will be available for the institution, for the network, but also for other actors on One Health, so that they can have that. And we are mounting this onto our One Health Workforce Academy, which is an innovation that is available for supporting health workforce on the continent. We do have a project that we are currently, actually the one I'm attending now, we are work planning, that has a strong element on research in addition to the training that we've been doing. So we are very elaborate and very intentional on having specific affirmative action, especially for women research leaders, because some of the research that we've had and the discussions we've seen is that the women normally shy away, or they are really being like PIs, or they don't want to take up those roles. There are many challenges when we did our discussions. So we are going to be intentional. We are from the planning stage to be intentional that we want to target to have a certain number, minimum percentage as women PIs under the research that we are going to support. And that way we know that the implementers will not have any escape. Then the gender balance, like I said, at the leadership level, we're looking at the network-wide governance body, the efforts that I've talked about, but also where possible, maybe at the country level, but also more important, we are also looking at the implementing teams. And then, of course, like I said, the user-friendly tools for gender mainstreaming in training and education offerings, in research and the community outreach, which are the core work that we are doing. So this is what we've done as an organization. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to respond to some, but that's our experience at the network.
Thank you, Agnes. That was lovely. You were very persuasive and very strongly with your points. And I can totally understand you. Since I come from the Balkans, it's always 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but you're going forward, and that is good. Okay, any questions for Agnes? Maybe at the end? Okay. Then we go forward because we have some speakers that need to be elsewhere, and we have a limited time. Don't forget, please, speakers, be aware of the time because we have limited time for this workshop. So be within your frame. Okay, so next we go to Helen Muguni. She is Associate Professor at Department of Infectious Diseases and Global Health, Public Health and Community Medicine. Professor Muguni will share with us some real-life experiences from Africa during COVID time with her presentation that is named Gender and Infectious Diseases, Lessons Learned from COVID. And I am very excited to hear this because COVID has been quite a snap in Africa, if I know well. So I would really like to see what you have to say. Thank you. The floor is yours. And do you have a presentation to share?
Yes, thank you so much. I will share my screen.
Okay.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And so I'm Helena Muguni, and I'm an infectious disease and gender specialist. I'm at Tufts University, the Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine, and thank you so much for this invitation. So because I'm in infectious disease arena, it's always easier to talk about One Health because the focus has really been on infectious diseases, One Health centered around infectious diseases. I will share some lessons learned from COVID-19 pandemic, but not just in Africa, because I'm based in the US. I'll actually share some of the experiences from the US and how this builds into One Health. I think Julie said one key thing, that one of the tipping points is actually gender in One Health. And as we think about One Health, the definition of One Health, human, animal, and environmental health, I always like to take a look at what we call our spillover ecosystem. So I'm gonna really touch on 3 key points. Why is gender important in One Health? Where are some of the opportunities? And how can we create this One Health framework with gender at the center? I like to use this spillover, what we call a spillover ecosystem map, because when people think of One Health, they think of human, animal, and environment. But there's so many other issues, as we saw with the COVID pandemic, that really do not relate to environmental issues or surveillance issues. They relate to behavioral factors. They relate to gender and culture. They relate to inadequate policies and governance. So food insecurity, agriculture, and land use. We saw this in the COVID pandemic, that these are some of the issues that led to countries' poor response or inadequate response during the pandemic. And so as we think about One Health, really gender is so key because it builds into culture, it builds into behavior, it builds into food insecurity, it builds into policies. And so as we think about this, thinking of gender as a key One Health competency is very important. I like to mention the Sustainable Development Goals. I feel to me that this is so central. Their One Health goals, I call them One Health goals, but at the same time, they really speak to some of the issues that we talk about with gender as well. We know that number 5, of course, is related to gender equity. But when you're thinking about no poverty, no hunger, life on earth, climate action, gender is very central to all these issues as well. So why do we talk about gender? One, because when we're thinking about infectious diseases, they're different genders. They're affected differently. They're vulnerable in different ways. The risks, biological, economic, social, political, and the consequences are different for different genders as well. And in order to understand even risk in infectious disease, we have to understand the gender varied abilities to respond to these risks. As we think about this, of course, based even on what we saw with COVID-19, we have to think about equitable policies, interventions, and we do not want to perpetuate gender inequities because this is common. Sometimes when we forget, we go in and then we end up perpetuating all these inequities related to gender. One of the things we want to do as we think about gender in One Health is increase community participation and advocate, become advocates for One Health with gender as a central component. Not forgetting intersectionality. It is easy to forget that, but we must realize that when we think about gender, it intersects with age, it intersects with economic status, with social status. So we have to look at it from that intersectionality perspective. And then, of course, we have to increase the number of One Health practitioners. We are in the One Health space, so increasing the number of One Health practitioners is really important as well. So maybe as just a quick example, right now we are dealing with an Ebola outbreak in Uganda. And when we talk about Ebola, we talk about exposure questions. What's happening there? Who is being exposed? All this really built into gender. Who is being exposed? How is the virus being transmitted? What activities are males, females doing that are leading to exposure? How is the virus being shared? Who is it that is affected the most? So can we think about the likely exposure routes? Are they based on gender? Are they based on culture? Is it a man who's going out hunting, or is it a woman who's cooking the food? And as we think about those, then looking at, if we want to solve this issue, we must be able to understand the likelihood or impact of this zoonotic event. And whether it's environmental, we're talking about deforestation, or it's cultural, gender is always central. If we talk about environmental deforestation, who is it that's probably going out there and cutting wood for firewood? Is it males? Is it females? And what roles are they playing in that? The next thing that we talk about, I'm going to go back and just sort of give us COVID perspective when we were there. Remember when COVID started in January 2020, by April of 2020, we could see certain trends that when men and women really had roughly the same crude prevalence across the world, but more men were dying from COVID-19. And I can show you some figures. This is sort of like the prevalence, how many people were affected. You can see it's almost balanced. But when it came to who was dying, this next figure shows that very clearly. This was about April from Global Health, April or May of 2020. And you can see in the third column that even though the first and second column, the percentages were almost the same of men and women, the deaths now in the third column, there were more men. Dominican Republic had about 79% male dying compared to 21%. And 72%, you can see that the men dying at this time were really in the 70%, while the women were fewer. So this is one of those things that became really evident or prominent at the beginning. And there were ideas that, also this map shows that at the global level, there were so many cases of men confirmed dead. You can see the ratio here, the number of cases, hospitalizations, ICU admissions, for every 10 women, 18 men. Deaths for every 10 women, 14 men. confirmed cases that had died for every 10 women, 14 men. And so when we think about gender, thinking about it from both perspectives, male and female, is really, really important. Here we can see that during COVID-19, a lot of men were dying, and there were reasons why there were so many issues. Like in the US, they said, hey, with the male essential worker, there was this cytokine storm that maybe was related more to sex. Is it that there's an increased biological susceptibility of males? Is it that males smoke a little more? We still don't have evidence of that. Is it that estrogen in women is protective? And so we found that there was a lot of mortality in the men than women. But when we take another look, another side, looking at the gender-related factors, then this began to affect women more. So looking at, well, men and women receive the same quality of care, the same frequency of care? Do they have the same scientific knowledge about the infections? Gender roles, what gender roles limiting male and women's, participation in access to healthcare or even accepting healthcare? Were they waiting for the same amount of time when they were waiting for healthcare? As all these were gender issues that were being discussed at that time and became really, really important. Just some of the statistics, I think Julie also mentioned this a little bit, that in the US, there was something that was called the SHE session. Between August and September 2020, 865,000 women dropped out of the labor force. In the same period of time, only 216,000 men exited the workforce. 1 in 4 women reduced work hours, moving to part-time roles, taking leaves of absence, stepping away because of childcare issues. And of course, domestic violence increased, diverse genders as well, LGBTQ communities, intersectionality. There was a lot of victimization. There was a job number that was released in October of 2020 in the US, and they said 140,000 people had lost their jobs. 100% of them were women. So it was called the SHE session, And then we know that on average, women were spending 4 hours a day on unpaid care work compared to men who were spending 1.7 hours. If we just take a little bit of a look at Africa at the same time, we find some of these things, the gender disparities, even in PPEs that were designed for men, even like face masks. Yeah. Face masks were mostly designed for men, not for women. The stay-at-home policies increased workloads, multiple duties. Women were at the front line. Increased gender-based violence, I've already talked that. Staying informed, in sub-Saharan Africa, 393 million women did not own cell phones. So when we were sharing this information on COVID-19 and using WhatsApp and using all this social media, a lot of women did not have access to this information. And of course, small businesses, which is sort of the core of Africa. There's a woman who owns a salon. There's a woman who does, all these small business. They sell vegetables on the market. They collapsed. I work in the livestock sector. A lot of women lost their chickens. They lost their goats in this time, and they've still not been able to recover. Table banking, which is a common thing that people do all the time. It's an opportunity for women to meet together in small groups. People borrowed, they were unable to pay back. And of course, the fact that countries were not disaggregating data by gender or by sex, and that it is important to do that. So just under snapshot, this is a snapshot of countries that were not doing that. Very few countries were doing that. And so even information that came out was just general and not much disaggregated by sex or gender. So then maybe just what are some of the opportunities that we see right now as we think about gender integration? Because these are some of the lessons that we learned. Then what do we do? I think there are great opportunities out there. For us who are looking to ensure that gender is mentioned and talked about and integrated, I think there are many organizations that are pushing for integration of gender into research, into interventions. I know the World Bank is, USAID is, IDRC, World Health Organization. And so this gives us an opportunity. We know it's limited, but it gives us an opportunity to actually do something and continue agitating for this. Many organizations have developed gender and women empowerment policies. Like Agnes mentioned, AfroHorn is one of those organizations. We know that IDRC now will not fund anything without a gender lens. European Association, NEO, as well, formed a gender policy committee to improve sex and gender reporting. Global call to action has been issued for gender in interventions and evaluations. There are many tools that are measuring gender-related changes. Women Empowerment in Agriculture Index, the Gender Powered Index, there's so many of them. And so taking advantage of this, and then of course, One Health. One Health now is, everyone is sort of moving towards One Health. How do we ensure that we take advantage of that and really build gender centrally in that area? So that brings me to my final question. How can we build One Health frameworks and experiences based on what we know? I think most important, a lot of us talk about in our organizations, mapping stakeholders. What are the roles and responsibilities of these different stakeholders? How about really mapping stakeholders based on gender roles and responsibilities and power dynamics, ensuring that that is included as we think of any mapping, as we think about stakeholders and the dynamics and what is it that, what drives different stakeholders? How can we include gender in that? Even if we don't have specific funding for gender, I always say sometimes we may not have specific funding for gender, but taking advantage of what we are doing and making sure that it's included is really, really important. And then one of the things that we've done that I thought was really successful is we've required onboarding, when we are onboarding anyone into our organization, to make sure that they are, to make sure that we provide gender equity in recruitment, hiring, and workforce training. We provide gender and microaggression training. We provide implicit bias training to them just in the beginning, and even for our recruiting bodies. If we have a committee that's going out to recruit, have they had this training? Do they know how they're going to look into it to make sure that when they're bringing people on board, gender is really key and that they give equal opportunities to both males and females? At the same time, how can we increase gender capacities for One Health practitioners? We are in the One Health space. How do we build more gender champions? Agnes has mentioned that a little bit. How do we ensure that more people, besides the gender experts, can do gender analysis? They can be able to recognize gender inequities. They can see gender gaps. Just regular people, veterinarians, medical doctors, environmental scientists, engineers, economists, ensuring that people have that capacity to be able to do that. How do we increase the number of people who can effectively carry out these gender analysis in projects and advocate for gender policies? How do we ensure that scientific ethic bodies, biosafety committees, all these teams that we work with all the time are really thinking about gender in the back of their minds? And what are the specific gender indicators that we can be able to include and make sure that they're being enforced as we develop policies, as we do research, as we implement interventions in the field? How do we build coalitions that support gender issues? I think one of the projects we're doing is keeping women at the center. We've made a really big attempt to build a team of what we call critical partners who can support these women. We call them strategic partners, we call them critical partners, but we are always calling upon them all the time. We know that they're responsible for implementing gender responsive policies and transformative actions. And then of course, Agnes has mentioned this, integrating gender into training, into other One Health modules as well, developing gender action plans and making sure that you recognize gender capacities of different partners, that we have a strategy, and of course, funding. Sometimes we say we will have an accountability framework, but then there's no funding for gender work. I would say that many times when we get there, let's piggyback and take advantage of what's already there. One of the things I do, because I'm a gender specialist, It doesn't matter if I'm going to do an infectious disease training or I'm going to do a risk analysis training. I always have a section in it that talks about gender. So I take advantage of what I'm currently doing to ensure that gender is a key part of what I'm doing in my daily environment. Of course, data is so important, making sure it's disaggregated, making sure we have gender sensitive indicators, and considering intersectionality as well. I like this statement that came out during COVID, that the success of the global response, the ability of both women and men to survive and recover from the pandemic effects will depend on the quality of evidence informing the response and the extent to which data represents sex and gender differences. I think this is key. And if we can make this central, then we should be able to succeed or at least move forward in different ways related to gender. And then finally, maybe just some conclusions to summarize as we think about this, making sure that we include and integrate gender as a core competency in One Health, and ensuring that it's not just gender experts, it's bringing in everyone to sort of talk about this, to have this gender lens, to be able to have capacity to do gender analysis, ensuring that we have gender transformative M&E indicators, as well. Transforming systems and barriers. One Health is already doing that, using that as an advantage. We are breaking silos, making sure that gender is included as we are breaking these silos. And of course, as we know that gaps exist, but recognizing that much is already known about the importance of including a gender perspective in One Health and just continuing to work in that space. Thank you very much. I will stop there and I'll stop sharing my screen as well. Thank you.
Oh my God, Helena, you got my heart pumping really fast. You were like a fast train, with so much information and so much passion and everything that you carried us with you through this. You have claps all over the screen. You can see it. So fantastic, really. Okay. Do we have somebody that wants to ask a question at this moment? Because Professor Helena will be leaving. So we have her now. And in short, she will leave. Let me see the chat.
And if questions come up, I know that the team can be able to answer on my behalf, because I work with Bridget and you guys, colleagues in the same space. So I know that you can be able to respond. So no problem, Sarah. Yeah.
Okay. I also wanted to say that you can put, all of you can put questions in chat during the presentation, so then we can read them at the end. But okay, we will let you go at this moment, but for very short. I mean, you're so fantastic. We'll have you again, I hope.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity. Right.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, we move on. Now we have Bridget Bagnon. She will talk about gender issues and communication. And she's one of those persons, when you ask her, does this issue has something to do with gender? And she says, yes, of course, everything has to do something with gender. So that's what I learned from her at my first status. And so she's an anthropologist, One Health with gender lens, independent consultant. She worked at many places, but she will present herself better. I just want to say that the topic she's talking about is fantastic and it's happening in real life. So I love when she talks about communication. It's very interesting. So Bridget is my other favorite One Health gender friend from France that I have. So Bridget, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you so much to my beautiful colleagues that presented just before me. I think that this session is becoming very, very, very interesting, because we are dealing with so many issues and it makes a very holistic perspective. And I think this is interest as an anthropologist, my interest in gender rely in the fact that gender is omnipresent, gender is everywhere. And it's why I wanted to present on communication, because I think that a huge part of our daily life as professional, as people, is about communication. So I think it's important to say something about gender and communication. Yes, I am an anthropologist, social anthropologist, and I've been working on gender issue for more than 30 years. As an independent consultant, working on different projects with different organizations in different continents, but mainly on sexuality, around HIV, and also on animal disease, mainly on HPAI, avian flu, in Africa and in Asia. So I've been working with Julie for a while and with Hélène, Agnes for many years on gender issues. So why communication? Because I think the situation is still very complex and needs to be understood. By example, I'm asking you some question to try to understand what is the situation at the moment. By example, in the USA, what do you think is the share of story told by men? And I give very few alternatives. Is it 81%, 71%, or 61%? The correct answer is 71%. It means that 71% of the story that people are hearing in the US are told by men. Another question is related to Kenya. So what is in Kenyan media the proportion of men compared to women in governing body and top management position? Is it 25%? Is it 35%? Is it 45%? And the right answer is 35%. So we see there's a huge gap between men and women. The participation of women in governing bodies, the participation in women in being able to make, to voice their opinion, to tell their story is still very complex, is still very low, both in Kenya and in the US. Other data from Latin America, out of 114 countries of Latin America in 2015, the question is, what is the percentage of women heard, read, and seen in newspaper, television, and radio news? So what is the percentage of women who are voicing their opinion? They are heard, they are seen in television. So the right answer is 24%. So we see that the problem of communication, the problem of participation of women in communication is so important because it's everywhere, it's what we are consuming every day, it's what is influencing us so much in our daily life as individual, but also as professional, because we are always in meeting, we are always speaking about something, we are always speaking to people in community, in at district level, at government level. Communication is part of our life, it's part of the different, it's part of One Health. It's part of all the different components of One Health. It's part of human health, animal health, and the health of the ecology. So communication is very important. And when we click and we look for data in relation to bottle feeding, by example, what do we see? We see mainly women feeding children. When we look at learning to ride a bicycle, we see mainly boys riding a bicycle. When we see work, we see mainly men working in front of a computer. So we see that we are looking at internet all the time. We are looking on internet a huge part of our day. And we see those images that are completely conventional and they are completely giving us a very stereotyped role for men and women. By example, when I look at president, and my colleagues show us also a different situation, board member or people participating in meeting in relation to One Health or to climate change, and we see always that men are dominating. So this is the image that we are seeing all the time, and we need to learn to deal with this situation and to try to transform it. So what we do is we do gender analysis, and my colleague have been speaking about gender analysis in so many domain, and I wanted to speak a little bit about gender analysis in communication. We might know this continuum, we call it the gender equality continuum, and we are looking mainly at transforming the relation between men and women. So when I look at the data, when I look at communication, I'm trying to see how much transformative is the media, the communication, the information that I'm receiving. Is it exploitative? Is it reinforcing the stereotyped vision of men and women or people from different origin? Or is it transformative? Is it transforming the possibility of individual to explore fully their capacity and their possibility in life? And we have developed different ways to do gender analysis. So one way is to look, as I showed you earlier, to look at data on whose voice is heard, who is speaking, who is portrayed, and in which manner the person are portrayed. Is it a stereotypical way, or is an unstereotypical way? How people are communicating, because we know that men and women often can communicate quite differently. And where are men and women positioned in the communication process? So, who is in the board of director? Who is deciding of the topic? Who is giving the possibility to speak to different individuals? So those are some of the elements that we are looking at when we do a gender analysis of communication, of media. It can be news, it can be cinema, it can be flyer, newspaper, any kind of information that we are producing for our own work also is very important to analyze in this way. And what we see is that the gender relation are a relation of domination and are perpetuated, transmitted, and reinforced in the process of communication. It's why communication is not neutral, and we need to take great care of communication, because we are also, we might also, if we do not take care, recreate and reinforce discriminatory images of men and women in the process. So if we look at the barriers that women are facing in journalism in sub-Saharan Africa, and we can think also that some of the barrier might be found in other continents, that women complain about job stagnation, salary discrepancy, and we know that those barriers might be found in other contexts, in other disciplines. Women are less likely to hold influential position in the media. We saw it earlier with less women on the board of the media. We also see a disparity between men and women in the distribution of jobs role, and women complain of sexual harassment, bullying, sexism, racial discrimination, and difficulty to combine family life with their professional commitment. So those are the barriers that women are faced in the media. If we look at the barriers that women face in ICT, we also see that some differences, huge difference, discrepancy can be registered because less women have access to ICT. And often the violence that we saw, that we face in real life, expand and extend online. So women might also experience violence in their online work or access to online data or information or network. So women are facing difficulty, many barriers in relation to ICT because of the inadequate infrastructure, affordability, language barrier, illiteracy, and Ellen just spoke about the fact that women during COVID also couldn't have access to information in relation to COVID. When we work in villages and we try to give information about animal disease, we see the same kind of barrier. So there is still a big gap in ICT, and we do not see that policy are being developed to try to take into consideration this gap or to eradicate the existing gap between men and women. So communication is also a very important topic we need to take into consideration in our work. So I'm going to be very practical on how to integrate gender in the communication process, because as Ellen said, as Agnes said, as Julie said, we are integrating gender in all aspects of our work. So it's quite important to constantly ask ourselves questions and to try to get data in relation of the way we are processing, we are dealing with communication issues. So the basic data that we are collecting is about the number of men and women that express themselves, who define where the event is going to take place. Is there the same number of men and women speaking? Are you taking in consideration the personal life of the participant when you define the date? You know, it's the same kind of things that we discuss when we do field work and we have focus group with men and women in the community. We need to take into consideration and respect the different roles that people, men and women, are having in society. So we try to organize meeting at the right place for the different gender. In the event, any kind of event, a focus group, a meeting at district level, provincial level, who is doing what? Who is at the reception, who is serving the coffee, the lunch, you know, all those things are important because all those things are a reflection of gender discrimination sometimes and cultural aspect prevalent in the society. Also, we look at who is represented in the visual, like in the page from internet that I show you earlier. When I speak about breastfeeding, am I going to represent a man or women breastfeeding a child? Are the role in which men and women are presented stereotyped or transformative? What are the different position of power of men and women in your visual? What are the topics presented by men and women? Are women always asked to speak about children care and men asked to speak about economy or vice versa? You know, because all those topics are very gendered and we can reproduce stereotype by reproducing those ways of asking one person of one gender to do something instead of the other one. Or we can be transformative by challenging those stereotypes. So we are making progress by pre-testing the material, inquiring about what we are doing, and verifying that what we are doing corresponds to the way people see reality. By example, on this slide, I'm showing you a poster that was done by my colleague in Laos during avian flu, you see. So while we very well know that women are the one who are taking care of the chicken, and that the women were the one who were able to find out early in the morning when they wake up that chicken were sick, the poster depicts a man, even a young boy, in his Sunday clothes, beautiful Sunday clothes, with a mobile phone. And when we carried out pretest of the communication material, the poster, women explained to us that this was not the reality. That didn't correspond to the reality. It was absolutely impossible. Women were the one who were in charge of taking care of the chicken. So we know that communication material are often done by men who live in urban area, who are middle class, educated. And in this case, the material that was developed was aiming to communicate with women, but nobody was taking women's perspective and point of view into consideration. So when we make communication material, it's extremely important to do pretest of the material, to make sure that we are communicating the right thing to the right person and in the right way, so that people can identify themselves. So we make sure that when we develop event, when we have meeting, we give the same position to men and women, and we give them the same time to talk. That we make sure that men do not cut women when they are talking, because it has been observed in different studies that when a woman speak, men tend to cut her and do not value what she is saying. But if a man just after repeat or use the same idea, but on his own voice, you know, other men will recognize the idea as relevant. So it's extremely important in meeting, even if women are very few, to make sure that their voice is listened, and that they have the same possibility to talk than the men, and as much as possible to try to make sure that they are participating in equal number, you know, and that they have the same power in relation to the decision making in those events, in those meetings that we are implementing and that we are managing, of course, because in other we don't have power to try to change the situation. Another way to try to make sure that we integrate gender in communication is to give turn to speak, to organize a roundtable discussion, to give a ticket or a stick or chronometer to make sure that the voice of women is heard at the same level of the voice of the men. And another aspect that is very important is to integrate gender in writing. So maybe some language are less gender sensitive, but French, my mother language, my mother tongue, is very sensitive to gender. So in English, maybe try to make sure that you use noun ending by men. You are not using noun ending by men or man or men, like policeman or spokesperson. Use spokesperson instead of or spokesman. Chairperson instead of chairman. So those are ways also to make sure that we integrate gender in writing, in reading, in our oral and verbal communication. By example, also instead of saying every permanent representative must submit his credential to protocol, try to make sure that we say his or her credential to be gender sensitive. We always see he or she to try to make sure that we include men and women in whatever we write, whatever we say, to try to make women more visible, okay? To try to change this invisibility of women. So the inclusive language is extremely important. In research, the same. Research is also about communication, because we go to the field, we ask questions. So who is asking the question? What is the composition of the team? What are the research questions? Are they gender sensitive? How many men and women are going to be interviewed? In which position? And systematically, we need to make sure that we have a gender lens in whatever we do. Even the research topic need to be gender sensitive and gender relevant. Are we speaking about sex, or are we speaking about gender in this research? Do we need to collect data about sex or about gender? All those aspects need to be taken into consideration. And I think that for now, I'm going to close my presentation here, and thank you very much. I hope you enjoy this presentation. Thank you. I'm going to close my presentation, and I'm going to answer to questions, if any. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bridget. It was fantastic as always. But you know, I just realized that we have totally unbalanced meeting here. I mean, we have all women speakers. So thank you guys in the audience. Please make this workshop gender balanced by speaking up and by letting us hear your voice, at least at the end. And thank you for being here anyway. Okay, are there any questions for Bridget at this moment? Or we go on to Elena's presentation, and then we can talk at the end. I have one question to Bridget, but I will save it for later.
Elena spoke already, yeah?
No, our Elena, the other Elena. Okay, no questions at the moment. Okay, then we go forward, and I present to you Elena Boriani. She will talk about gender equality lens, chemicals impact, and climate change. Elena is principal researcher and owner of EB consultancy company. Elena is very active in the field of chemicals and toxins, nanoplastic, and other bad and dangerous things that are all around us, but we can't see them. Now she will put your attention to it, and you will not be happy, believe me. She's one of the best moms in the world. I hope that she doesn't mind me saying that she has 4 kids and she juggles her life very successfully. I honor her for that. And I am very excited to hear your presentation. Okay, Elena, floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Can you all see my screen now? Yes, super. So I'm really honored to speak, and there's a fantastic audience and fantastic other speakers that have been before me. And I feel also a little bit under pressure, because I really want to give some content without being boring. And sometimes my topic can be a bit boring. Anyway, as you see from the title, she already, Sarah, presented me, so I don't go further with that. But I will touch the chemicals impact and climate change with the gender equality lens. So what are we talking about? I think that there's chemicals, so there's little particles made by molecules that are around, atoms that are around and can disturb a lot, can be seen with the power if we take into consideration the vulnerable groups in countries that are also developing countries, like children, women, indigenous people, as all the previous speakers has said. So sometimes this lack of communication, lack of education, We don't know. I recently had a talk along a dinner. We don't know that COVID-19 is connected to climate change. We don't know that chemicals will be rising their numbers because it's needed more pesticide, more pharmaceuticals to face the new world that is also given by this climate change. And who is paying the most? Of course, who is sometimes the gender, that is women, children, and phases of the women life in particular, from the puberty to the menopause between the fertile area. And we will see here. But here you can see in this picture that both environment and human are so connected in this chemical. We have problem with eggs where there were some chemicals, so there were not reproduction of eagle. And of course, bees, they were diminishing, and frogs, they were hermaphrodites all of a sudden because of too much atrazine. And then we have, of course, a lot of problem in fertilizing, in having problem to have fertile and reproduction for women and also men. So it's really, we are all connected. So what is this? I think is very important is raise awareness of the linkage between the chemical exposures, the effects not only on human health and the environment, within having in mind the gender differences and risks and impacts. So everyone can read this big report that I've been through, that is very nice, and there's maybe a lot of words, but I think it's true what they say, that we're doing too little and too slow, and how we can cope with that, maybe with communication and education. I don't know, I will go through this along the presentation. But here, for example, everyone knows that now we are rising up with the climate change degrees, and this is changing a lot of things. So having the problem of more chemicals around, as I said, diminishing the production and for the food safety. And then, of course, is also connected to foodborne diseases. So I just juggle a little bit in the report, and many times you find the word gender, and many times you find the word chemicals. But what I think is not so connected is what really we can do, and what they know, and high political or governmental places about this. So I still think that there is a big gap of what it can be done and what is people or government doing right now. Here I also like this imaging, and this is taken from the IPCC report 2022 about the climate change. And then we see that the gender is actually the second one of the vulnerability where you have anything that it can pose a risk, and then not only age, mobility, access to care, socioeconomic status, pre-existing condition, characteristic of health system, but this is related also a lot to gender. And then, of course, as I said, is connected to chemicals. Here again, this is also taken from the same report, and we can see that if water temperatures and with longer summer season, for example, there is a difference with the climate change. This lead with more foodborne pathogens, and this need to new chemicals putting into place, again, to face this less providing of goods from agricultures. And then is this connected also with antimicrobial resistance? And this again is connected with problems in the water, for example, and taking directly into the human and not human also animal organisms. So I think that we should have, here again, and is not really connected in some common view, this relationship, but I think more and more is popping up, like something that it was floating down, like we were. Now I will take an example, so it's a bit more easy to understand. But the gender dimension and climate related, for example, in the migrations, the contaminants, this is all, you know, I take something from the reports. And then, for example, the bioaccumulation also, some chemicals stay forever. And of course, they stay forever in a sediment. If, for example, the water is retracting, it will change the place where the sediments are, and they will be more in the water, more in the soil. So this can lead to new scenarios, and it's really to consider that. For example, the example I will take now are the chemicals that I think they're quite well known, but still there are people that don't know what they are, and they're called endocrine disruptors. I will not want to scare you, but as they are a mixture of chemicals that can unfortunately interfere with our hormones, how the hormones in our body works. And this is related a lot to women, of course, related a lot to children, of course, is related a lot to minorities. And there I wanted to connect also to all what is diseases, genetic diseases and minorities, and as people that have some rare diseases or unfortunately some type of differences from the majority of the population, is also gender equality. And this is not taken always into account. And there was a list, and there is a list. You can just have the presentation, click there or whatever. If anyone is interested, can contact me. But those chemicals, unfortunately, are still used. They try to cut in some part of the world. I'm living in Denmark, and here in the northern countries, some chemicals, they are not in the hospital anymore. They are not given in the intensive care, for example, to children, to babies, but in other part of the countries of the world, yes. And so these chemicals, plastic chemicals, plasticants, are coming still into the blood, and they can have a lot of bad consequences. But here you can see that they are a bit everywhere. So pharmaceuticals, food preservatives, personal care products, organotins, polychlorinated biphenyls. So unfortunately, it's everywhere. So what is the problem is the accumulation. So it's not 1 + 1 give 2, but sometimes 1 + 1 give a lot if you are in a certain time of your life. For example, the pregnancy, or the first 3 weeks of pregnancy, where it's really everything happening in the fetus. Again, where they come from, here another imaging, where you can see food production, industrial activities, personal home care, medical care, is quite well known. There are a lot of studies, and what is said to me is that those lot of studies and to be not really understood all the time, and then not read even a lot of the time, and not considered with the gender lens, because this is what we are talking about. So if we take from a male point of view, or just a human point of view, we miss a lot of the picture. Instead, if we take the gender lens in it, we see completely another picture. So I wanted just to say that this connects to climate change, of course, and this connects to One Health, to gender equality. So, as I said, this influence both the human health, environmental health, and their compounds that particular some of these endocrine disruptors stay forever. So it's something that we should reconsider completely in the future, because in the modification of the climate, in the modification of our stay in the world, we will have completely different understanding of chemicals, and that can also be connected to other problems of the world. So here you can see a bit where it comes from, but I don't want to be boring again. So it can be something that if you need, but what is maybe interesting is here the effect of metabolism. So is associated sometimes these chemicals to obesity and insulin resistance, problem to diabetes and liver abnormalities. And then you can have a lot of metabolic syndromes and go on and go on. I mean, sometimes there are some things that are not really connected apparently, but they come from chemicals. So sources that can be avoided if just So sometimes some workers, for example, or some people taking care of babies, some women in some villages also can be exposed too much in some type of work, for example, or in their own life to some compounds just because of missing of communication, of education, and of dissemination of these fantastic reports that we have around with all the knowledge about those chemicals. So as you can see here, this is what I wanted at the beginning to say. It's very important to know the phase where you're in, for example, in the egg and the sperm, the fetal life, infant, pre-pubertal, adults, or all time. There is all some effects that it can be different of these chemicals. There are some publications that explain what can be dangerous in which moment of your life. Again, here in the northern countries, in Scandinavian, they give a fantastic brochure to the women when they say that they are pregnant. Not only don't drink alcohol, but because this is a common problem here, but also what they can take, which are maybe some clothes, and also that it's better to not wear, what is better to not be exposed as cosmetics, for example. I wonder in the world, how much is this information coming? I don't think it's so. So I think it would be very important to give more space to the communication. So what I also think in some developing country is maybe totally not written either in the labels what is about, what is some of the chemicals dangerous or why. So I think it's important to have more awareness. And now we come also to the climate change. So climate change and chemicals, what they stay for, why. So I said already that the chemicals will be used more, I think, with pesticide and insecticide. You know already how many new species we have in the air because of getting warmer, the summer warmer. So maybe more flies are there, maybe more insects. So this is just common houses hold, and this also can have a bad exposure because if you spray something, it can be bad to you if you don't know what it's about and in which phase of your life you are. And again, there are many more chemicals that will change their movement in. I don't want again to be boring, but the chemicals, maybe they are produced in Europe and they arrive to another place of the world because they go in the water and then they evaporate and then arrive again, they fall down. So we find out, for example, in Faroe Island, they have tons of microplastic or micro pollution because of all these movements of currents. And this is also will change because of the climate change and new different temperatures around. So I think that the work, interdisciplinary work, should be really taken into consideration because otherwise we will miss some of the picture. Again, we have here the possibility to have some factors that are extra stress factors, I would say. That is, as I said, the temperature, the acidification, the salinity that will change because if a lot of ice will melt down, of course, I can't conduct the same analysis thinking that there is a certain type of salinity. And then, of course, different type of early stage life, adult life, and so on. So, for example, we have toxicity studies, and there will not be any more okay in the future because the situation and are changing. So if before we were saying that the chemical was safe in a certain condition because it was tried in that condition, maybe it's not safe anymore, maybe it's more safe, who knows? But this means that honestly, we have to reconduct some studies to be sure that the chemical is safe also in the new conditions that are posed with the new climate change and the increase of temperature and more water around. So there are a lot of steps actually to consider. So what is my conclusion a little bit is we come there now, and I do believe that only gender equality, of course, awareness and One Health awareness, having also always focus on the minorities. For example, I think that if we think always in the minorities, so with the, for example, indigenous people needs or rare diseases needs, we will get to, or women or special phase of women life needs, we get to an understanding of what is very important for everyone. So we don't come to the idea to lose any person, to lose any communication. So I think that is so important. Of course, you can use also the reuse, reduce and refine to modify, to not have so many chemicals around. Of course, is that. But socio-economical and political decision should be focused on the minorities or women or gender equality lens. This will help to have a big opportunity to embrace everyone. Again, this is my understanding. And of course, dissemination, communication. Never stop, communicate what you know. If you are a researcher, if you are someone that you are studying a certain niche, that is maybe, as we said, a niche, but it can be everything seen by the gender equality lens. So spreading the reports, but also making so that some reports are easy to get. So making understanding of the meaning of the data, not just data, but as we said also with the previous speaker, some data means something. So explain why in COVID, male and female, they were outcoming differently, and again, which are the problem with being fertile, and which is the problem from men and women, and why so, and so on. Awareness to the population, to check the governance management. So what my government is doing about the gender equality is taking care of that. It's taking care that some women are more exposed to some chemicals or not. I mean, what is going on? And then what I think is that developed countries should a bit lead this. I mean, because we see so many disparities in some developed countries. So finally there should be really the understanding of what is going on. I mean, if we are using more chemicals or not, and what the climate change is bringing. So this preparedness and mitigation should, of course, start from there, having a better picture and better awareness. And again, this education. So I think education on gender equality. So everyone should be aware that is not something. I came from Italy to Denmark, and already here, women have a voice. All what you said about communication is here, even too much sometimes, but it was not in Italy. So education on gender equality. So what it can be done to be there as a minority, as someone with a special need, and still have a voice. Because there are some laws out there that want that everyone is equal in the world. So there should not be so many disparities. And again, this education of why I use some chemicals, from the one I use in the house to clean, or the one I use to paint, or the cosmetics, or what I eat. So their effects, exposure, and here it can be also sent also to the industries, to the one that prepare this chemical. Sometimes they're very nice, they write in the label what is about, when you can use. Some other times is written nothing. So maybe we can work there. And what do we mean really with climate change? Why is it a relationship with all of this? So I'm making question, but to make that awareness and the toxicological impact. So what this chemical will bring now and in the future? Sometimes it's so that it can be potentially nothing now, but it stay forever. So maybe something can be accumulation in the body of an animal, in the body of a fish, for example. And then, of course, the relationship with foodborne disease, food safety, food security, that is also there, and it will lead to many other problems. So some of you have here, if you have my presentation, some of the place where I took some information. And I wanted to thank you. And I'm here, I'm of course open for comments, questions, even collaboration. I'm very happy to be in this fantastic One Health group. And thank you.
Thank you, Elena. This was very nice. I mean, not nice, but it was useful. It was very good to know about this. So you're saying that, like, in the last few years, there are so many people that have a gluten allergy or insulin resistance, or what you said. So that could be because of too much of these things in nature, right?
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of accumulation of things that is a bit unknown. I mean, a lot of the studies now, I mean, I didn't want to be too much into details, but a lot of the studies now are mixtures. So it's not that you take in only one chemical, but it can be some things that you are accumulating since you are in the belly of your mom and so on. And so I think having more awareness from the producer to the consumer is very important. And yeah, it can lead to problem in your life, and it can be something that you can maybe change or having some medicaments for that, or sometimes not. Or it can also jump a generation. I mean, in some case of endocrine disruptors, you can jump a generation and come to the second generation.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Please stop sharing so that we can see all the people. We lost some people probably due to time, but maybe we can ask everybody to put on your camera so that we can take a together picture, if you're up to it.
A together picture.
Yes, a together picture. I just click print screen and then we are all in the picture together. Okay, and so while we're waiting for people to put on their pictures, you can also ask questions. There is one question in the chat and I will read it, but just tell me if there are any other. Is Agnes still with us? Agnes. Unfortunately not. Okay. Okay, I'm taking a, okay, people are still coming. Now feel free to put on your camera. It's okay. We'll just make a picture for our group, so don't worry. I mean, we are streaming on YouTube, so if you don't want to, you don't have to. We're just making this for our archives. Thank you. We like to see male and female faces in our workshop. That will bring to our image. Okay, ready? I will press the button in 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay, perfect. That should be nice. Let's see. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so there was one question for Agnes, but Agnes is not here, and neither is here Natalia, who posed the question. So are there any others? No. Okay. I just wanted to comment on, is Bridget still with us? She also left. Okay, never mind. Everybody's leaving one by one. Okay, we would like to invite you. I sent you in the chat the website of our group, and you can find us there. You can join us, you can support us, you can ask us whatever you wish. If you want to put your email in the chat, we can contact you. If you want to join us, you can do it right away and just put your email in the chat and we will contact you later. But anyway, I think we can thank you all. Is there anybody from the room? I just now got the picture from the room. No. Okay. Okay. Any final comments? Thank you, people. You were very kind. We love you all. Keep gender issues in your mind and just contact us whenever you want. Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you, Sarah. It was
Yeah.
great to have you as there. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Somebody from hosting? Is there anybody there from hosting? The IT people? Are you there?
Yes, you stay there.
Okay. I can't copy from chat. Is there a chance that we get the whole chat? There are a few emails in the chat, and there was one question, and I can't. I wanted to copy it and put it in the Word, but I can't.
I'm sure as the information she will become stopped the chats and send them to you so I can respond to them. If you're not able to get them now, she will collect all of them and send them through an email.
Okay, I don't understand. Did you say you can send it?